Good afternoon. I'm Terry Carter, and this recording is for the discussion board about my project. And my project is The Different Faiths of Colonial Tidewater, Virginia. Most people know that the established faith in Virginia was the Anglican Church. It was a part of the original Jamestown colony and was the only practice that was recognized by the king. However, as in England, there were people who practiced as true Anglicans, and there were people who publicly observed Anglican practice, but held different ideas privately. And then there were people who were open dissenters. Because of the distance from the mother church and the harsh conditions of the colony, importing and maintaining a central church hierarchy was nearly impossible. There was a chronic shortage of ministers and no ecclesiastical structure for qualifying individuals for ministry in the colony. Because of these shortages, very few parishes had a full-time minister, and the ministers that were there had to cover very large parishes. The Virginia Assembly functioned as an ad hoc ecclesiastical as well as civil authority. They vested in the individual vestry many of the powers both of the church and of the civil government. They were responsible for local church discipline. They also helped to set boundaries for people's land, called a practice called processioning. One of the responsibilities of the local parish was to find and hire a minister and to fund and build a church building or a meeting house. Well, because the official church was not meeting the needs of the faithful, they sought to remedy the situation on their own, and this led to the establishment of many small dissenting communities. There were Puritans in both Norfolk and Nansemond County as of the 1620s. In Nansemond County, there was a family called Bennett who had come in, who eventually, all collectively as a family, owned over 10,000 acres of land. And they were largely Puritan in faith, and when they could not get a minister through the church in Virginia, they sent a letter to John Winthrop in Massachusetts asking for a minister, and he sent 3. They sadly did not last long because of official government opposition to Puritans. In Norfolk, the Elizabeth River Church, one of the first churches with an actual building, hired Thomas Harrison, and then discovered he was of the Puritan bent, and the officials didn't like it, but the people did like him. And so it went back and forth, but eventually he had to leave the colony as well. We know that there were Quakers in Virginia by 1658 because the Assembly voted to expel them all. In 1672, the founder of the Quakers, George Fox, visited Norfolk and Nansemond counties and stopped at the Somerton Meeting House, which is the oldest still active meeting house in Virginia. According to the book, The History of Norfolk County, Virginia and Representative Citizens by William H. Stewart, the earliest Presbyterian congregation was founded by Reverend Francis Makemie in 1684. Much later, in 1769, Robert Williams met with a small Methodist congregation in Norfolk and established a church there. 3 years later, he came back from travels with Joseph Pilmore, and the people liked the Reverend Pilmore so much that they petitioned the Bishop of London to grant him ordination, and promising that he would have access to a church and a pulpit that actually belonged to the Anglican Church. That's Trinity Church in Portsmouth. The minister there had opened it up to him. The earliest accounts of Methodism in Nansemond County don't occur until after the disestablishment of the church following the American Revolution. At that time, many of the Anglican congregations were having to combine, and the church buildings were being abandoned or turned over to others. And an example of that is Holy Neck Church in Nansemond County. The minister there was James O'Kelly, who's a very interesting character. he will cause a split with Francis Asbury, and he will found his own denomination, the Republican Methodists. While the Baptists may have been in Virginia prior to the Revolution, there is not much in the records about their presence in either Norfolk or Nansemond counties during the colonial era. There are references to their presence in nearby or adjacent counties. For freedmen and slaves, there are references here and there about churches having areas where people of color could sit for worship. For instance, Trinity in Portsmouth had benches designated for African Americans. James O'Kelly preached to African Americans at Holy Neck in Nansemond County and wrote a treatise on abolition. Unfortunately, the available record is too spotty to come to any conclusions about denominational preference among African Americans in the colonial era. As always, there's much more research that could be done. This is only a start to establish the ideas about faith and how that faith affected the society at large. The culture of Norfolk and Nansemond counties were and are very different from those of the Northern Neck or from the Shenandoah Valley, and further research would help to understand those differences and how they shaped later history. Thank you very much.